Talk is divided in two, and it's focusing on two artist practices. The one by Berlinde De Bruyckere, who is now with a fantastic show at Sandretto Re Rebaudengo Foundation, and we will talk with her and the curator of the show, Irene Calderoni, and followed this presentation, this discussion, to Monica Bonvicini and Agustin Perez-Rubio, who are there, and also protagonist of another fantastic show recently opened at OGR. So I pass to Irene and Berlinde the word, thanking them for being here. Thank you.
Thank you everybody for being here. And for all of you who came last night to the amazing opening that we had with Berlinde's exhibition, it was so crowded. But last night we all invited everyone to come back and see the exhibition another time in different conditions, in a new atmosphere, which is the one that you can only imagine by seeing this picture. A different kind of mood that really is inspired by the work. So I would start by asking Berlinde about this specific place that she built inside the Fondazione, this installation, especially done for our space, which really turns the exhibition space into a specific place, so an immersive experience. So Berlinde, with this piece, really wanted to take the viewers somewhere. So I would like to ask her what were her feelings and ideas around this topic, and so what is this place that she wants us to go?
What's the place where I wanted to take you to go? It's a good question, because when I was in the space to install my work there, it was not ready, so I made the site-specific work, and the work was growing in the space, and I did a lot of changes during the last weeks when I was working in the foundation. And the inspiration of making this huge installation came from a workshop in Anderlecht, where I was a long time ago, 2013. I was there before because I was looking for particular skins, horse skins, that I use for my other works, the works with the corpses of horses. And when I was there, I was really surrounded by all these wooden pallets piled up with skins, cow skins, horse skins, and I never got the experience to be surrounded by so many death around me. And that place I was blown away by this experience, and so many thoughts came into my mind. I made these connections with death in war, where we became a number. So we are losing our name, we are losing our personality, we are talking about numbers of death in war. And this was one of the layers that I feel being there. But on the other hand, I was surrounded by so many people working in that workshop, and they were treating the skins with salt just for short preservation before they sent the skins to leather factories or tanneries. And this was so beautiful to see how these people took care of skins, the skins who just arrived from the slaughterhouse next door. And they arrived in a way that they were still fresh, and they were losing their value in a way, because knowing that they were taken off from living animals half an hour before, and that they just arrived in that workshop in huge plastic bags. And it was a very sad thing to look at for me. But on the other hand, looking to all these people who took care of the skins. So they pulled the hook, they were hanging the skins on a construction just to inspect the skin and to measure them and to give a label on the skin, was for me creating a future, because knowing that after that, this skin will go to tannery, to leather factory, and to become something different, something new. So even when I was surrounded by so many deaths, I could feel some hope in what I was looking at in that particular moment.
And one of the things you were talking about is also this idea of the way they were spreading salt on the skins, which you can see from some of these images which Berlinde took in this workshop, and the way these men were throwing the salt on the skins in order to preserve it as a first treatment to the skins was a very complex image, as you were saying. This notion of throwing salt in the wound is an image of extreme pain, but at the same time this idea also of a kind of a sexual gesture, but also a very timeless one, the idea of throwing semen on the ground. So that is also the ambiguity and duality again.
That was really what I felt being there and looking at them. And this was so generous that I could see so many things happen before my eyes. So when I went back home, I couldn't forget that place for a long time. And I started to create works around that topic. Works who have been shown in museum and solo exhibitions, but I never was able to talk about that experience of have been seeing Eros and Thanatos coming out from one place. And when I was here in Torino in January to meet Patrizia and Irene and to start to do a proposal, I was really taken by the possibilities here, the large space, and I thought instead of making a solo exhibition and showing my existing works and talking about dialogues between these works, I really want to go for a full experience, that people can enter a space like the space where I was so many years before, and that my audience became part of my installation. It's not just looking to the work, it's becoming part of the work itself.
Yeah, here you can see some images, and for those of you who are still wondering about it, it's not real skins, not animal skins. That is the question I most frequently answered to last night. These works are realized through casting, and the process of casting and then reproduction in wax. So there are sculptures in wax. And this is very interesting, I think, also this process that the artist employs and Berlinde employs in order to realize her works, because casting has such a strong, powerful connection to the idea of touch, of getting in touch with something, so creating something which is so similar because had a connection, as if had a physical connection. So this idea of materiality, of something very sensuous also, which comes back also through the strong tactility of these works, is also something that talks about this ambiguity and again this duality between something which is dead but is still alive through its strong materiality.
Irene mentioned, I think it's really important that the wax for me is a sort of transformation, so I can talk about very heavy topics. But when I work these topics out into wax or into skin or textile as blankets, there is something soft in the perception of these works. Everybody knows that wax is very fragile, even knowing that these piles with skins are so heavy and so fleshy and so fresh. And when you translate this in wax, it's a sort of metaphor that happens.
And here, in fact, we have also these other works in the exhibition where you can see also the transformation of the skins into piles of blankets, the similarity. So there is really this process through which, the skins go through, and they get more softer and softer, and resemble this very important notion of yours, which is about, again, touching the body through also the blankets and giving comfort, but also suffocating again. So This is also, and here you can see more images of the original workshop, which was the inspiration for this series of works. And here we go to another very strong image, which takes us back to the topic also of the talks, which is desire and sexuality. These works which inspired the series Penthesilea.
Yes, so this is what I mentioned before. So you see this iron construction, and when I saw it for the very first time, for me, it was like I was looking to huge funnels. And then looking at this man who were hanging the skin with an iron hook on top of the structure and spread the skin open, was like they were looking to vagina. And that was a very sexual gesture that I was looking at. So this is also the reason why I felt love and death there so obvious.
And this also gave birth to a series of drawings, beautiful drawings with a very direct sexual topic.
Yeah, when I was working on the sculpture Penthesilea, I started to do also this series of drawings, and they are made in watercolor and collage. So for me it was like being involved with that topic, and I did the drawings after the images of the skin on the structure there.
With the images. Ah, nice. This is not a nice message. Okay. Yeah. It's okay. Maybe we go on now with our narration about the images that we all hope you saw last night, because the topic of desire is also very important and very central in all of your work, and is very present also in this exhibition, even if it's not so straightforward. Maybe vai avanti, ma dopo questo. Okay, here we are. So it's all this series of and here is the installation and the sculpture which reproduces the structure, the metal structure.
And it's more or less a copy of the object that I found in the workshop, but I was also very much touched by the fact that the legs of this huge, heavy structure were so thin, so it became also a very fragile object that could be thrown on the floor and being destroyed.
And this series of works were also part of an installation that you did for a scenography at the opera in Brussels, which was named Penthesilea. So there was also a history, a story of Eros and Thanatos, a very intense one. So all these works also were part of this narration.
Yes, that was the first time that I was working out the theme of Penthesilea for the stage of the opera. And for me it was the first time that I was doing this so strange in a way that I never got the experience that people were using my work to walk around, and they were not able to touch, but on the other hand they were walking through the hanging skins, and that was an image that I felt strange in the beginning, but afterwards with the whole story of the scenography of Penthesilea, it became one big work, and my love for opera started there, and I really want to do more on stage. So the energy that I felt there was great. So everybody was giving the best of themselves. So the musicians, the singers, and then the stage became just one big energy.
But also it's interesting that I think what you did here in Torino is very operatic. As an experience that the visitors go through. So there is this intensity, and there is this mise en scène, and there is all the elements that contribute to create the overall experience, or as someone said last night, the Gesamtwerk.
Yeah, the floor is a very important part in the main installation here, because of the floor. I could see that people were a bit anxious to enter the space, but when you enter, then you became, as I mentioned, part of the work. And I think this is something that I learned from doing this work on stage and opera, that I was looking to people walking on certain floors.
And another moment, very intense one in the exhibition, is the last room that is devoted to a series of work which took another inspiration, even if one connected again to the skin topic, and it's this series of work inspired by flowers and what we learned to call them closed gardens. Here we included a few images of pictures that Berlinde took.
Yeah, I wanted to share these images with you because when I started to work around my own enclosed garden, I went back to my archive of images, and then I learned that for many years I was taking images of lilies, but not the lily when they were full and beautiful, and when the smell was so strong. So the most interesting photos that I got in my archive were the images where the lily was giving up, and then the petals fell down, and then you could see very often just the stamen was still there and started to leak. So this very erotical image was important for me to create this new group of work in the wooden frames. And the wooden frames is something that I used since 2017. I never did it before, and they started from the wish to make big drawings on old wallpaper, and at the end I didn't feel satisfied by the drawings, so then I started to work with pieces of wax on top of that. And the reason why we have these three works, the frameworks here in the show, at the end I find it quite interesting to have them at the end, because there you can really see the metamorphose of the skin who became flower. And even when it is a flower in decay, there is still something beautiful in the metamorphose who is still going on.
Yeah. Here you can see the details of it, where you can see how the petals of these wintering flowers were actually produced through, again, the casting process, and taking as a starting point again these huge cow skins, which are turned into petals of flowers. And also in this detail and in this work, another major topic of yours, which is branches and trees. So again, all these elements put together, and as well as the blanket, which is here and it's showing out. So it's interior, it's inside. So it's a series of works which perfectly synthesizes also a lot of topics of your work, and especially also through this lens of erotism and desire, which is more intense in this.
The flowers became like flesh also. Very often when I was looking to these works, when I started to make them in my studio, and people entered the studio looking on these works, they didn't know where I was working on, and for them they became corpses, so they were thinking on my previous work, and it was not clear that I was looking on flower. And at the end I think it's only very positive that it is beyond the narrative story of a flower, but for me it was important to give them a name, and the lily, as is used so many times in old master paintings, and even today it's an image that we very often see in contemporary art.
And these works were shown in a beautiful exhibition of Berlinde's in Mechelen near Brussels last year, when they were in a strict in a very close relationship with these enclosed gardens, but also with this series of drawings which made more clear, more direct the connection with this erotic and sexual imagery, which is also present in our exhibition through this sculpture which opens the show, actually, the palindrome. If you want to tell something about why also you decided to open the show with this.
So I wanted to open the show with something light, and I think this work is the most ironic work that I ever did. So everybody is, when they enter the space, start laughing. They are looking to a huge phallus. But then they don't want to say it or to show it to me, because everybody is thinking that I'm a very serious woman in my other topics, but I'm not. For the ones who know me better. And I thought it's not, it don't has to be clear why this palindrome is here. When you went to the whole exhibition, just to the last room, seeing the flowers, and then go back, then you will feel the connection or the dialogue that I was putting into this show. And it's not necessary that you really have to understand why all these elements are into the show, but you feel that it's going to be all right.
And it makes more sense at the end when you see the flowers, and then you connect the whole issue of desire and also this bodily experience and this death drive, which is at the same time with the life drive, and this is well condensed here also because maybe you didn't mention this, but this is a sexual instrument, something that meant to arouse the stallions in order to collect their semen. So it's about vitality. It's about a very, a process that is meant to create life.
Yeah. So and when I saw that object for the very first time, I was at university working on corpses of dead horses, and the professor brought me to that space, and I never had seen that before. So I started laughing, and I took images, and that was in 2010. Right? And I never thought I will make a sculpture out of this, but now looking for the proposal for the Sandretto, I thought I need this, and I started to work on the sculpture this year.
And thank you so much for the great witnesses and insight of your work. And we invite also Monica and Agustin to the table. Thank you, Monica, and thank you, Agustin. Agustin is presently curator of the next Berlin Biennial. And as I was telling you, Monica Bonvicini has a show now at OGR.
Grazie mille Anna, grazie mille Artissima, è un piacere essere qui con tutte molto amici, e anche un piacere per me perché Monica e io mai abbiamo lavorato insieme, ma siamo conosciuti molti anni fa e sempre siamo cautivato per il suo travaglio, il suo lavoro. Ma Monica e io siamo amici, sono parte di una famiglia, no, è solamente l'introduzione per il pubblico italiano. E mi sento molto comodo, è un onore, Monica, di essere qui oggi con te, perché teniamo molte questioni insieme, non solamente per l'arte contemporanea, anche per il punto di vista femminista, attivista, anche desde la micropolitica, e anche come parte di una famiglia di artisti, di curatores, di gente relazionata con l'arte contemporanea. So now let's switch to the English, maybe for the people that doesn't speak, and also because my Italian language is not very good. But first of all, we are not gonna, I'm not the curator of the next show that she just did in OGR. So, but I would like to start, just from the beginning, as Irene and Berlinde just did, talking about maybe just this exhibition that you saw, because I can understand that more or less the Italian public know very well your work, because even you don't live here, both we live now in Berlin. But I think that during revising all of your work during many years, the work of Monica, it becomes, I was really interested and shocked with this installation, because during all of your career you were having a position very strong, not only in terms of the display and talking about the structures of power, that architecture is like in a Foucaultian way, you know, some ways to talk about, of course, desire and pleasure, but also about surveillance, you know, and how it affects our bodies and our intimacy, also our politics and social bodies, but also our micropolitics. And but in this installation, I was really fascinated because instead of to have a position more as a strong woman talking against the system, you are referring to the social housing in a very intimacy way. You know, I could feel that something that also has a lot of relation with your own perspective and your own origins, because many of these houses coming from the 50s, you told me, no, they were building also in Italy, but also in France, in another small villages here. So I would like to understand these personal, of course, professional perspective of the work relating this separation and difference of the architecture, but on the other hand, the ways that you perceive this in a very intimate way, because we are talking about house and about homes, and the micro stories maybe behind this carpet, right? For more people. Okay, you feel more comfortable?
Thank you. Thank you, Agustin. Thank you, everybody, to be here. So, yeah, I mean, I started working at the beginning of my career dealing with architecture and the question of the construction of the sexual identity within or with or through architecture. So, and that's something that I'm still working on. For this particular project for Torino, I choose to show something I've been working since more than 2 years. I've been, actually it's a long process, I've been documenting how this with the suburbs, especially in Italy, that are just so changing through times. I have a big fascination with suburbs. I don't know if it's the 90s, something, but it's something I really like. And I'm also working between the low and high art using material of everyday mixed together with more valued material, and that's maybe also where the question of desire is coming in. But so I decided to show, maybe we can go to the last image, or not the one before. Sorry, there's a bit of a chaos with this. No. So this is the series, it's too small here, but it's a series of photographs I took in the last 2 years, like I said, with just basic houses, like the houses that you draw in school. They were built at the end of the 60s, beginning of the 70s, and they were two family houses. People moved out, people died, half of the houses got sold. And in doing so, this idea became so strong in the 70s, which was to belong to a community, to belong to a class, that is your class, your community. At the time, in the beginning, the houses were all looking the same colors, and through the years now, 50 years after, nobody cares about the community, nobody cares about the class association because, of course, things changed. I'm not judgmental in this research of mine. It's just something that I found very, very interesting. Unfortunately, the holidays here, you cannot really see them, but the neighbors, really, really decided sometimes, it looks like they didn't talk to their neighbors, and they decided to paint the house in strong blue or in pink to make the fences horizontal instead of, vertical. So there is a strong sense of individuality and singularity, which I think is very, it's quite representative for the kind of, society we're living in, where it's so much about me, myself, I take a picture of myself, take a picture of my house. And where the class definition is not so clear anymore. So for this installation, also because the place at the OGR is really gigantic, it's 70 meters long, so maybe we can go back to the house. I decided to build half of one of these houses. It's a one-to-one recreation. I found one of the first plans for these houses. So you can imagine mid-end of the 60s, the first one where you can see the house. Yes, so you have a garage. It's very American also, I live in Berlin since 30 years, and when people, especially back in the 90s, people would say, oh, when do you want to go home? Italy is so beautiful, so romantic. And I was thinking, well, I grew up in a place where, my street was called 11th Street, number 9. So it's a little bit like New York, I don't know, it's something, there is no romanticism at all in that kind of places. And they're very American. There is a place for the garage, because in the 60s everybody had a car, and they're built for a classic family. What was a classic family at the time, which was mom, father, 2 kids, the car, the garden. I decided to have this one-to-one only, constructed only with wood and in a way that you can also find in California, where all the houses are built on the wood. I studied in California and took a lot of pictures at that time, and was very fascinated about the way they were building, because in Europe, especially in Italy also, I was used to the idea that we build forever. You grow up with so much history. And in California, you have all these beautiful houses built out of wood and drywall. So I remember going around in Los Angeles, knocking at every Bank of America facade, because it's like, you can really make a wall and go through, kind of. So, yes.
But on the other hand, for me, when I saw that picture, also in relation with your work, these kind of houses also are always related with bodies, always is how it looks, our images, so how we use identities like, accessories or fashion to pretend to look like. And on the other hand, it's like the social housing that is related with period, where the architecture becoming one social idea. I think that this separation is also the separation between the fall of the utopia, So this is also something that it's facing the way that the society more and more, as you said before, is using only this body, and the architecture pretend not only in the sexuality term, but also how we can escape from this idea of new ideas to recollect again our own body, or in another way. I don't know, always I was really, when I saw the picture, it's the micro stories, because I would like that you talk more about the main piece, this carpet and what is happening inside, but I think for me the title is Family Plot, this carpet, this kind of leather and what is behind this. But on the other hand, I was trying to understand this relation between what is a house and what is our structure, our bones in related with this house, and what is our idea of the workers or the labor there, and also of the economical, because you work a lot on this way, on the economical system and the power related with architecture, with this this installation with that we saw with the dollar image. Hysteria with the dollar in these walls. So it's only to understand in one moment, not to be fascinated with the the past and the melancholize of this, to the melancholia that it creates, but on the other hand is to put on the table really like the micro story, to talk about things that maybe never you wanted to talk. I don't know.
I don't know, because I do not really think so much about family, because for me, like I said, it was interesting that these houses were built for families in a very clear way. You can see it in the plans of the houses. There is one major bedroom for the parents and two, bedrooms for the kids. It's like the most basic kind of architecture for the most basic social structure that you can imagine, which is a family, right? But I do not believe that this structure is existing anymore. We do not believe in this. I mean, we are living in different times where this classical family doesn't really make me. It's not so strong anymore.
It's cultural. It's like sexuality.
Exactly.
We're talking this, no? Like sexuality, or the way that you compose and you create your own new, let's call family, but in a cultural way. Like sex. Like sex is not only, it could be generalized, it's only a construct that you develop, not only with the organs, also with the way that other ways, other objects, other smells, other kind of imagination and construction could be also related with the sexuality.
Yes, and then I was also thinking that though the family as a structure doesn't exist anymore, we still have these houses and people are still living there. So there is still relationships that are growing and existing and developing within this old structure like a house. And so that's because in the house I really didn't want to put too many things, because at the moment you put something in this big sculpture or architecture, you are telling a story, and I didn't want to tell a story. I'm not interested so much in what is happening behind the scenes. I didn't want to even suggest what is happening there, because I think it's a kind of rhetoric that we all know kind of or imagine. So, but it did create something inside that it's, I think, something that everybody can understand, which is on one side I had this huge light piece hanging from the ceiling. I work a lot with these LED neon lights. I love these lights. I call it the garage lights because it's very, very bright. And it's never bright enough for me. We do a lot of these lights in the studio, and every time we turn the lights on, everybody's like jumping 3 steps away because it's so bright, and I'm like never satisfied, and I want to have it more. I like the idea that light is really blinding you and it's so strong. And then I produced this carpet out of male bells, and they're together with balls. So it's they're quite masculine, if something like that exists anymore in the production and also in the aesthetic. It's quite heavy. And I also put around the houses quotations that I choose out of a book I totally love and I highly recommend, which is the Collected Stories by Diana Williams. She is a master of short stories, and she is absolutely brutalizing the English language. Her stories are very, very like knots, very difficult very easy to read, but very difficult in terms of what kind of relationship she's talking about, and they're very erotic without being explicit. So I wanted these fragments of situations she's describing that are related to apartments, to houses, to architecture. And because I have these fragments around the house that you can read and take away with you, I wanted to have kind of fragments also of bodies inside the house without having the real, representation of a female, male, baby, kid or something. And so for the opening, I had 3 performers or 3 dancers who were under these carpets. We worked with them for some days. Essentially, a friend of mine was saying that this performance was creepy. I don't think it was creepy, but maybe I'm the only one who thought it was not creepy. These 3 dancers were lying down there and they didn't move. They were staying in the same position for around 30, 40 minutes. It was the longest they could stay in the same position without suffering. And then they would, move into different position in a choreographed way. So essentially, nothing was happening, but you could see these bodies, and because it was about desire, this thing, I want to read one short fragment, which is actually a quotation by Lacan. And I thought, if I found it so fast, I thought it's a nice one. It's a little bit, I don't know, too much maybe, but I thought it was really nice. I love you, but because inexplicably I love you. No, but because inexplicably I love in you something more than you, I mutilate you. And I really, I know it's yeah, but it is like that, and
yes. I understand, because it's the design of the object, and also this is sometimes what we do, being my practice is very focused like yours on feminism, even I'm a cis man, gay cis man, and sometimes I mutilate myself, in the way that I want to give a space for the other woman, so to listen around and to have the voice. But it's like this, because I love you, I need to shout my voice, or even I need and I want to be under other umbrella that maybe other male doesn't want to have. For example, in Berlinde, we are a group of 4 people, there are 3 women and we identify as a feminist. But you feel that you are a transgender. I'm not a transgender, I'm Agustin, but I mutilate my own gender when we are plural, and this is the way also that we want to put like a grain in a big mountain of sand, the small contribution, but sometimes also in this desire you have to, repress yourself. And this is also, it's very strange sometimes with the desire, because this is other way talking about maybe sexuality, and this is part of that this exhibition has under, but I think you were in another cases more, how can I say, more direct, and in that way for me it was very interesting that in this show you talk about the lamp, because I'm talking about the bright light, you were talking about this, because sometimes in all of your shows with this bright light make me to feel in a quirófano, in a place for surgery, in a morgue, between this relation with, what happens, this line in between a place with asepsia, that also is a place with doesn't exist more memories, it's a place always like a tabula rasa, everything is now and ready, so I like this, I would like that you talk more about this relation between the light and the architecture in your work, because I think the light, it's not a sculptural, or it is, but also it's a really important material that interfere directly in the structures of power in relation with architecture in your case, and how you develop this.
Well, lights, I think it's lights create space. I mean, it's like air. Very much, yes. It's like air. I did at the beginning of my career this work, which was, I don't know if you remember it, I put two fans against each other, and they were together producing so much air, so much wind, actually, as a hurricane, which I think is 73 or 75 miles per hour. So it was like this turbulence. So I absolutely love the idea of creating space, really putting borders, if you like, without having walls, without building walls. So in the show at OGR, for example, the yard, I don't think you have a show of it, but the yard of the house, what is happening behind the house, I work with special lights that I use mostly in theater to really cut the space in a perfect square. So this is a little bit the blue velvet kind of garden where you have the sculpture with blocks and. But for example, I started working with lights in Chicago, the ICA, where I don't want to be fun. Where I was producing a huge light work, very large, very big and large, that was so bright that the guards of the museum had to wear glasses to be in the space. And altogether it was the lumens of all the offices and bathrooms and corridors that Renzo Piano planned and built for the new wing of the museum. And of course, where the art was, there was a different kind of lights, because art require actually less light, doesn't require a lot of lights. But in the offices, people were actually living with this, or like working with no window and with a lot of neon lights. So.
On the other hand, I think like my idea of this relation with the morgue and architecture, sometimes it was related, with, and also we experiment with friends, talking about body and disease, desire and disease. You have one important piece on the stage, but also related this crisis of the body and architecture, the crisis of AIDS, the crisis of many, many diseases, people that we lost, people that there was, we lost during the past of the years, and this is also related with the spaces in the memory, but also the spaces of the desire, from decreasing spaces for male gaze, or another liberation of the spaces, or also fantasize with the woman space, like this is interesting for me, how you want to create also another layer in the imagination of in a fantasy for a space for women.
Yeah, so you're talking about so many interesting issues. I don't remember who wrote it, but there is a famous essay about comparing museums to morgues, and it's something that I mean, as an example, for example, the new Kunstmuseum in Basel, which is not so new anymore, it has a few years, I don't know if any of you knows it, but it's, the entrance is full of steel, and it looks really, to me, and cement, and it looks to me really like a morgue. I mean, it's a total cold feeling when you get into this museum, and why is that? It's not because, the director of the museum or the architect doesn't want you to go inside, because of course they are dying for numbers of visitors, so they wanted to be inside, but it's really like an anticipation, an anti-camera of what they consider to be art. So is the museum the morgue of art, or is it like a library, or is it a space only for certain people? And I always really liked to deal with that issue, for example. If you can go to the Hysteria Award, which I don't know if you can find it. Go. Yeah, for example, this is a work I did this year in Vienna, and I completely closed the space and with aluminum place, so there was nothing else to see actually here, and it was definitely relating to this kind of idea of what a museum is. I also thought from the beginning of my career that as a woman artist, you have to, I had the impression that I have to occupy places. I really have to physically and literally take my space. I studied art in Berlin, and I don't know if it is like this anywhere else, but in Berlin, people were like, I started also studying painting, so they would tell you, paint big, because if you would paint small, the next day you would have lost your place. So this idea that you had to, physically really just be there, occupy space, otherwise, there is no space for you. And also, I read quite early on this very interesting Erik Erikson research he did in '68, where he put together in separate rooms girls and boys, kids, and they had to play, and he was observing them, and they realized that boys tended to build high, like towers, and they tend to build a lot and destroy a lot, or making war or something. And the girls, they were building a little fence, a little wall, or maybe a big one, I don't know, but it was low. And they were playing piano inside, and so it was '68. I don't think the same would happen if you would do the experiment now. Actually, I would really love to see the results now. But this experiment is actually still today. It's why so many people think that male are better architects. There's this idea that male can tell you, or guys can tell you, they have a better perspective about, from here to there, they're like 8 meters. And women, they don't know because they've been in the house all the time, generations.
It calls patriarchy, and it calls, of course.
Exactly.
It calls patriarchy, and it was in all the history. So this is very easy, for a lie, and of course in the art world, you can feel that now it looks like, okay, no, the old women artists that we discovered, no, we don't discover anything. These women were there ever and ever, time to time, century to century. So it's not like anything about fashion, anything about we discover anything, So it's to give the name and the value to the things that are important, So it's only, but it's the same rule, it's the same. So, yeah.
Thank you so much. It was great and intense, and we all want to come to see the show with another eyes. Also because after talking, you really discover what's really behind, and I want to come back to. I would like just the last comments by Berlinde and Monica, between the two of you. There's something that listening to each other came into your minds to talk about. One comment about these two strong artists working with sculpture mainly in such a strong way. I would like a last comment from you too.
When I was looking through your work, Monica, and when I was looking through you mentioned performance, and when you got the bodies on the floor and then covered by blankets, I feel something in common with my earlier work where I was working with feet and legs made out of wax, and the whole figure was covered by blankets. And when you mentioned that people found it really strange to do this and they didn't feel comfortable, it's exactly the same experience that I got when people were looking to my sculpture. They thought that the persons were real, they were made out of wax, but yeah, this is something that we have in common that I have saw today.
And maybe just to finish, I agree with you, and I think that's essentially what desire is, I think it's a desire as an artist. I think you always have the desire to continue on one side trying to do something that is very, very personal. Maybe you don't even want to talk about, but you want to make works about, and desire is something that it's not you cannot pinpoint it down. You can't really describe it, thanks God, because otherwise it would be there and it would be the end. So I think we have a lot of things in common and a lot of things we could talk about, but maybe another time. Yes?